"You're only good for taking care of the kids," my own son told me while his wife laughed. I had lost everything for them, but they didn't know I had already made a silent move. If this story touches your heart, subscribe. Every day there's a new story that could be yours. Tell us where you're watching from. I'm 67 years old, and the cruelest words of my life were spoken to me by my own son last night. "You're only good for taking care of the kids, Dad. Stop giving opinions on things you don't understand. You're old, and you know nothing about the modern world." Matthew told me this while my hands were wet, washing the dishes from the dinner I had cooked for his entire family. His wife, Sarah, covered her mouth, laughing as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. My own grandchildren looked at me with that grandpa is stupid face. The one they learn when their parents don't respect their grandparents. I just stood there, water dripping from my wrinkled hands, feeling my soul shatter into 1,000 pieces. This house where they humiliated me last night, I bought it, with my savings, with the money from selling the house where I lived for 40 years with my Helen. May she rest in peace. I sold every memory, every corner where we were happy, to give my son the house of his dreams. "Dad, we're all going to live together. It's going to be beautiful," he told me 8 months ago. "The kids will grow up with their grandpa nearby, and you'll never be alone again." Lies. All of them lies, wrapped in gift paper so that I, like the old fool they thought I was, would hand over everything I had without asking questions. But there is something Matthew and his wife don't know. Something I kept quiet all these months while they turned me into the free domestic servant in my own home. When we signed the purchase papers for this property, I wasn't the naive old man they believed I was. At 67, you learn that kindness without intelligence is just disguised stupidity. And I'm tired of being stupid. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of being treated like old furniture, only good for carrying things and running errands. My story of humiliation began the day Helen died, 3 years and 4 months ago. Lung cancer. Even though she never smoked a single cigarette in her life, I went with her to every chemo session. I held her head when she vomited. I stroked her hand when the doctors told us there was nothing more they could do. "Robert, promise me you'll be happy when I'm gone," she whispered to me on her last night. "Promise me you won't let anyone treat you badly just because you're old." I promised her, but I didn't keep it. I let my own family trample on the dignity she admired so much in me. The first few months after the funeral were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up every morning expecting to hear Helen's voice singing in the shower, expecting to smell her strong coffee in the kitchen, expecting to find her watering her plants on the patio. But I only found silence. A silence so heavy it crushed my chest and took away my will to live. Matthew would visit on Sundays with the family. He saw me sitting on the sofa like a ghost and began to plant the seed of the plan, a plan I now understand he had ready long before. "Dad, this house is too big for you alone. You'll get sick with sadness in here with so many memories." Those were the first poisoned words Matthew said to me. "The kids need more space to play, and you need company. If we sell your house and buy something bigger altogether, we'll be the perfect family." Perfect family. What a well-built lie. Because in perfect families, they don't treat grandpa like the household employee who doesn't get paid and has no right to an opinion. But I, like the old man in love with his grandkids that I was, let myself be convinced. Sam was 5 and would run through my house screaming, "Grandpa! Grandpa!" every time he arrived. Claire was 3 and would climb onto my lap so I could tell her stories about princesses and dragons. When Sarah told me, "Mr. Robert, imagine how wonderful it would be for the kids to wake up every day knowing their grandpa is there to take care of them," I melted like butter in the sun. I didn't see the manipulation. I didn't see the trap. I only saw the chance to not be alone anymore. The day I signed the papers to sell my house, I cried in the notary's bathroom. 40 years of marriage, of fights and reconciliations, of Christmases and birthdays, all gone with that signature. The house where Matthew took his first steps, where Helen had planted her roses, where we had been truly happy, was no longer mine. "It's for the best, Dad," Matthew told me, hugging me after I signed. "You'll see. In 6 months you'll be grateful you made this decision." How could I have imagined that in 6 months I would be regretting it to my very bones? The new house was beautiful, I can't deny it. Large, with a big yard, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modern kitchen. "Look, Dad, This room in the back is yours. Quiet, peaceful, far from the kids' noise. In the back. Far away. Those words already held the poison that I failed to detect. They gave me the smallest room, the furthest from the family's life, as if I were a guest just visiting, and not the man who had paid for half of that house with his life savings. The first few days were lovely. Like everything false that seems true at first. Sarah made me breakfast. Matthew asked me if I needed anything. The kids ran to hug me when I came back from my morning walks. Grandpa Robert, want to play soccer in the yard? And I, happy as a kid with a new toy, thought I had made the best decision of my life. How wrong I was. How blind I was to the signs that were already appearing, like dark clouds before a storm. The change began slowly, as all betrayals do. First, Sarah stopped making me breakfast. "Oh, Mr. Robert, I forgot. You can make your own, right? The coffee pot is right there." Then Matthew stopped asking if I needed anything and started asking me to do things. "Dad, can you take the kids to school? Sarah has an early shift, and I'm rushing to work." Of course I could. Of course I would. That's what grandfathers who love their grandchildren were for, right? I didn't know it was the first step to becoming the driver, the cook, the domestic servant, and the unpaid caregiver for my own family. Helen died on a Tuesday in August at 3:15 in the morning, while I held her hand, which was already turning cold as stone. 42 years of marriage ended with her last breath. I just sat there next to the hospital bed, looking at her peaceful face, unable to understand that my life had just been split in half forever. "Take care of yourself, Robert. Don't let anyone disrespect you just because you're alone," she had whispered with her last strength. Prophetic words that I failed to hear until it was too late. The doctor put his hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Robert, I'm so sorry. You can take all the time you need to say goodbye. But how do you say goodbye to 40 years of true love?" I drove back to my house alone in the early morning. When I opened the door, the silence hit me in the face like a slap. For the first time in 4 decades, I didn't hear the sound of the TV that Helen always left on. I didn't hear her barefoot steps walking down the hall. I didn't hear her voice humming old songs while she washed the dishes. Just silence. A silence so heavy it hurt my ears. So dense I could barely breathe. I sat on our living room sofa, the same one where we had hugged thousands of nights. And there I cried like I had never cried in my life. I cried until I had no tears left. Until my voice broke from screaming her name to the empty walls. The first days after the funeral were like walking through hell with my eyes wide open. I'd get up at 6 in the morning out of habit, just as I had for 40 years. And I'd automatically put on water for 2 coffees. I'd take 2 mugs from the cupboard, put them on the table. And as I was pouring, I'd realize that Helen was never going to have breakfast with me again. "My love, your coffee is getting cold," I'd say to the empty chair. And then I'd laugh alone, like a crazy person, realizing what I'd said. One morning I grabbed her full mug and smashed it against the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, just like my heart. But at least it made a noise in that cursed, silent house. The nights were 1,000 times worse than the days. I'd get into our marriage bed and automatically reach out my arm to her side, searching for the warmth of her body that was no longer there. Her pillow still had the scent of the cheap rose perfume she had worn for 20 years. The one she bought at the market because she said, "Why waste money on luxury if you love me just the same, expensive perfume or cheap?" I would hug that pillow and cry like an orphan, breathing in her scent until I fell asleep from pure exhaustion. "Helen, my love, how do I live without you? How do I stop from dying of this loneliness that's eating me from the inside?" I'd ask the ceiling, which never answered. I started talking to her out loud all over the house, as if she were still there listening. "My love, what should I wear today? The blue shirt you liked so much?" I'd ask the empty closet. "What should we make for dinner?" "I can't remember how you made that fish I liked so much," I'd say to the silent kitchen. The neighbors started looking at me strangely when they saw me in the yard talking to myself. Mrs. Carter from across the street approached me one day. "Mr. Robert, are you all right? You look very thin, very worn out." And I would smile and lie. "Fine, Mrs. Carter, just getting by." While inside I was dying, piece by piece, every single day. Everywhere in the house I found ghosts of Helen that reminded me of what I had lost forever. Her toothbrush in the bathroom, still with white hairs tangled in the bristles. Her slippers by the bed, waiting for feet that would never wear them again. her apron hanging in the kitchen, stained with tomato sauce from the last meal she cooked before she got sick. One afternoon, I dared to open her closet to find some clothes to donate to the church. And the smell that came out hit me like a hammer. All her dresses were there, waiting for her. I sat on the closet floor, hugged her blue Sunday dress, and cried until I ran out of air. Matthew came to visit me on Sundays, but I knew he came out of obligation, not because he was a loving son. He'd arrive with Sarah and the kids. He'd stay for exactly 1 hour, as if it were a doctor's appointment. He'd ask if I needed anything, and then he'd run off to live his happy life with his complete family. "Dad, you look really thin. Are you eating well? Are you taking your vitamins?" he'd ask, already checking his watch to see when he could leave. I tried to tell him how lonely I felt, how hard it was to cook for just one person, how strange it was to eat dinner watching TV with no one to talk to about the show. But before I could finish explaining, he was already giving me quick advice. "Dad, you have to make an effort to move on. Mom wouldn't want to see you like this." One Sunday, I dared to tell him the whole truth. "Son, I feel so alone in this big house. Sometimes I go for days without talking to anyone but the man at the corner store." I saw how his expression changed, as if he had just heard exactly what he was waiting to hear. "Dad, I completely understand what you're saying. A house this big for one person just doesn't make sense," he replied with a different voice. More interested, more calculated. Sarah nodded as if she'd been thinking the same thing. "It's true, Mr. Robert. You look very lonely here. It must be so sad to wake up every morning in an empty house." For the first time in months, someone seemed to understand my pain. But what destroyed me most was how loneliness was changing me as a person. I started neglecting my appearance, not showering for days, eating whatever I could find, standing in the kitchen. Why set the table if I was eating alone? I lost almost 30 pounds in a year, not from illness, but from a lack of will to live. Helen had always told me, "Robert, you are a man who respects himself. Never let yourself look bad." But without her, I had become a ghost of myself. An abandoned old man who talked to himself and stayed in his pajamas until the afternoon because he had no reason to get dressed for anyone. The worst part was when night came, and I realized I had spent the entire day without hearing my own voice speak to another human being. Only the one-sided conversations with Helen. Only my questions to the void. Only the echo of my footsteps in the empty hallways. "My love," I'd say to her photo on the nightstand, "I don't know how much longer I can take this life. Without you, I'm nobody. Without you, I have no desire for anything." And she would smile at me from the glass frame, but she couldn't answer me. She couldn't hug me. She couldn't tell me everything would be okay. When Matthew arrived that afternoon with Sarah and the folder full of papers, I was so desperate for company, so hungry for family love, so tired of the loneliness that was slowly killing me, that I welcomed them as if they were angels coming to rescue me from hell. "Dad, we want to propose something that we think will be good for everyone," they said. And I, as the lonely old man in need of love that I had become, listened with an open heart, with the blind hope that finally someone was going to stop me from dying of sadness in that house that had become my tomb. How wrong I was. How blind I was to the signs that Helen from heaven was surely sending me, so I wouldn't fall into the cruelest trap in the world. Matthew's plan began to unfold one Sunday in April. He arrived with Sarah and the kids, but also with a folder full of papers and a smile that I now understand was fake. "Dad, sit down. We want to talk to you about something important," he said with that serious voice he used as a child when he had broken something. The grandkids ran to the yard to play while Sarah sat next to me on the sofa and took my hand, as if she were my daughter. "Mr. Robert, we see you're very lonely here. Very sad. This house is too big for one person." Her words sounded sweet, but there was something in her eyes I didn't like, something calculated that I couldn't identify at the time. Matthew opened the folder and started showing me pictures of houses he had printed from the internet. Big, modern houses, with large yards and spacious rooms. "Look, Dad, imagine living in a place like this. The kids could have their own playroom, Sarah could have her office to work from home, and you would have a comfortable, quiet room." Every word was a baited hook. Every image was a promise wrapped in gift paper. "And the best part of all," Sarah added, squeezing my hand, "is that you will never be alone again. We'll be a real family, living together, taking care of each other like we're supposed to. But they saved the most effective bait for last, when Sam and Claire came running in from the yard. "Grandpa Robert, is it true we're going to live with you?" Sam asked me with those bright, excited eyes kids get when they're promised something wonderful. "That's awesome. We can play together every day," Claire shouted, jumping on my lap. Seeing my grandchildren's happiness at the idea of living with me was like an injection of joy straight to my heart. How could I say no to them? How could I refuse to be the grandpa who woke up every morning knowing they were close? "But, Dad, for this to work, you'd have to sell this house," Matthew said. And that's when the most painful part of the conversation began. "With what you get from the sale and what we can put in, we'll have enough to buy something much better. It's a smart investment, Dad. Instead of having your money sitting there doing nothing, you'd be investing it in a property that will be worth more every year." He talked like an insurance salesman, with numbers and percentages. But all I heard was the possibility of not being alone anymore, of not waking up in the morning expecting to hear Helen's voice that would never return. That night, after they left, I stayed awake until 4 in the morning, looking at the pictures they had left on the dining room table. Beautiful houses where I could be the happy grandpa, playing with his grandkids in big yards, where I could help raise Sam and Claire, where I wouldn't have to eat dinner alone watching TV every night. I talked to Helen's photo, which I always keep on my nightstand. "My love, what would you do? The kids need me, and I need them. This house without you is just a pile of painful memories." The following week, Matthew returned with more papers and more arguments. He had run the exact numbers. He had visited banks. He had spoken with real estate agents. "Dad, your house is valued at $250,000. With that money and the $150,000 we can get as a loan, we can buy a $400,000 house in an incredible neighborhood." The numbers danced in my head like music, but the word that resonated most was we. It had been over a year since I felt part of a we. It had been over a year of just me against the world and the loneliness. Sarah arrived with the kids in the middle of that same visit, and she brought a cake she had baked especially for me. "Mr. Robert, this cake is to celebrate that you'll be part of our family every day," she said, giving me a kiss on the cheek that smelled of expensive perfume and future lies. Sam and Claire sang, "Happy birthday, Grandpa," even though it wasn't my birthday. I got so emotional that my eyes filled with tears. "It's not my birthday, kids," I said, laughing. "But it's your living with us's birthday, Grandpa," Claire shouted, hugging me tightly. The pressure continued for weeks. Every visit brought new reasons why selling my house was the smartest decision I could make. "Dad, at your age, maintaining such a big house is very expensive. The taxes, the repairs, the cleaning. But living with us, all those expenses are divided among more people." Matthew always had a logical answer for every doubt I expressed. "And what if we don't get along living together?" I asked him once. "Dad, we're family.